Hey guys, and welcome back to another art video. You know, this whole starting to teach on YouTube thing has really got me thinking, I've got to start worrying a lot more about my image. I mean, I'm a big YouTuber right now, so I really have to start dressing a lot fancier if I want to fit in with the rest of these guys. So, I got some nice little clout goggles here, and I got this really nice coat. Ooh. Man, this is a really soft coat. I gotta say, this big coat here has a really nice texture. Man, wearing a big fuzzy coat at the beginning of May in Arizona. Not my best idea. So you guessed it, today we're talking about texture. Now, for those who don't know, texture is how something feels, or in art words, how something looks like it feels. There's so many different kinds of textures out there that all feel different and that all look different. I mean, just right here, there's fluffy textures like my coat. It's so fluffy! There's soft textures like this blanket here. There's rough textures like my sandpaper right here. And there's sharp, spiky textures like this fork right here. Sorry. There's so many different kinds of textures that we can find even just in where we're living right now. You can probably find so many different countless examples of textures just by looking around your room right now. Okay, I do a lot for you guys, but I really don't think I can sit this whole video in this coat. I think I'm gonna have a heat stroke. So we've talked about how there's a ton of different types of texture, like fluffy and rough. But in art, there's actually two distinct words that we use to describe what kind of texture we're working with, and it's very important for us to make sure we know the difference between the two. The first one that we're going to talk about is called tactile texture. Try saying that 5 times fast. Tactile texture, tactile texture. Anyway, tactile texture is any kind of texture that we can physically feel with our hands. So, anytime that you grab something around your room, like any of the examples that I showed you earlier, and you can grab it and feel it, and you can actually feel the different texture, whether it's soft or hard or rough, anything like that, that is what we call a tactile texture. Now, sometimes paper itself or canvases can have a different tactile texture as well. One example is something called watercolor paper. So if you actually feel watercolor paper, it feels a lot rougher. So that means it has a different tactile texture. The other kind of textures that we really need to know about is what's called visual texture. Now, unlike tactile texture where you can actually physically feel the different texture it is, this is a kind of texture that looks like it should feel a certain way, but it actually only just feels like paper. It looks like it has a different texture, but it doesn't. So let's take this picture for example. Now, looking at this picture right here, how would you say it would feel like if you touched it? Very good. So if you said that this looks like it has a rough texture, you're totally wrong. So it does look like it should have a rough texture, but if you went out and started touching your computer screen, you would find that it doesn't actually feel rough. You would just be touching your computer screen. And honestly, you might look kind of weird just putting your hands all over your computer screen in the middle of the day. But hey, that's quarantine for you. So any kind of drawing that looks like it has one of the textures of a tactile texture, like fluffy, rough, spiky, anything like that, but it actually doesn't feel that way, that's what we call visual texture. Now, artists use visual texture all the time in the drawings to make them look a lot more realistic. So they use different kinds of techniques to make their drawings look like they have the texture that the object that the drawing has in real life. They especially like to use lines and value, which we just learned about a couple weeks ago, and we'll go over it a little later on. Now, we talked a lot about how artists can start to make visual texture to make their drawings look like they have real tactile texture. And one way that we can start to practice how we can use value and line in our visual texture drawings is with a little activity called rubbings. Now, this is an activity that's very popular, and it's a good chance that a lot of you guys have done this activity before, but just in case you forgot how to do it, or if you still need some help remembering it, I'm going to show you very quickly how to do it. So what I want you to do is I want you guys to find an object either around your house, maybe outside somewhere if you go to the park, or if your house or apartment complex has outside areas. I want you guys to find some kind of natural object. So it could be a leaf, it could be a feather, it could be anything that has a nice texture on it. Now, unfortunately, I have a whole bunch of rocks around where I am, so I couldn't really find a leaf, but I was able to find this cool little fake shell on the ground, which is really cool. And if you look at the fake shell right here, it has a really nice rough bumpy texture. Kind of goes up and down, up and down, up and down. So I'm going to see what I can do when I rub on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a paper that isn't too thick, so I suggest maybe some printer paper, and it doesn't need to be a clean sheet. So if you have an old piece of paper like I have here, you can use the back of it. So all you do is turn to the side that doesn't have writing on it. You lay it right on top of your object. And then what you're going to do is you can either get a pencil or another drawing utensil. I'm going to use a crayon. I always think crayons work really well, but if you don't have it, a pencil works really well. You're going to hold down your paper. You're going to take your crayon and you're going to use the side of your crayon, and you're just going to put some value right on top of your object, and you'll start to see that it'll start picking up the texture and make a little rubbing of it. So let's watch real quick. Alright, so as you can see, my crayon picked up the texture of the shell, and it looks almost exactly like the shell that's underneath. Now, one thing I want to point out to you is you notice that the way that this shows a visual texture and how it still looks like it's bumpy is that the parts of the shell that are standing up are nice and dark. Meanwhile, those sort of ridges where they kind of go down and it's kind of in between the bumps is light. That is a way that we can show that there's different bumps all along the shell. So that is one way that we can show visual texture using rubbings. After doing those rubbings and seeing how artists can use line and value to show texture, let's take it a step further and see how we can do it with a drawing that we already made. So as you can see right here, I made a nice little drawing of a little ducky. As you guys know, I love ducks. And while this looks really nice, it's a very cartoony duck, you don't really see how fluffy the duck really is. And if you wanted to add that visual texture to it, how would you be able to do that? There's actually a couple ways. The one way that you can do it is you can make it very cartoony, and all you have to do is make these sort of zigzag lines. It's almost like a upside down M, which I guess is a W, but okay. Anyway, you can just do an upside down M or a W and then go around, and if you notice, I'm putting a little bit of shadows underneath it to really look like they're standing up. Now that's one way to do it, but I think that a better way to do it might take a little longer, but it's going to look a lot better, and that is by actually drawing the hairs. So all you do is you make very light lines all throughout your duck. So you see how I'm kind of following the contour of the head. I'm going up and then down in a very nice pattern like this. So you see how I'm very lightly doing that? That was already looking so much more like hair. And the way that we can do value with this is some parts of ducks are a little darker than others, right? So maybe the head is a little darker. So we're gonna do some more lines right here. And if you remember our lesson about value, the more lines that we put in one area, the darker something will look. So what we're going to do is fill this all up. So we're going to give them a nice dark head and a light body. So all you have to do is just fill this up with these lines. And then maybe I want to do that for the wing too. So maybe I'll go through and I'll add lots of very close together lines. And now the important thing here is if you really want your duck to look realistic, you have to follow the contours. You can't just draw random lines anywhere because it's going to look kind of crazy. So follow it. Imagine that your line is going down the back of the duck or down the belly of the duck like this. Up and down, up and down, up and down. And voila! Right there, we just used line and value in a very simple way to add some texture to our drawing. And you can even go a little further if you want to be schmancy. Add a shadow underneath the wing. And look at that. That's a pretty good first step to a realistic duck, if I say so myself. So I advise you guys to give it a try. You can try any animal that you want. I love ducks. You can try your dog, your cat. You could try a fish. All these different animals have different kinds of textures. And so I want you guys to look at them and see how you can draw those textures. But that is going to do it for us today. I hope you guys learned a little something new about texture. But if you still are unsure on how to finish your packet for this week, don't worry. Feel free to come to one of our office hours, which we have every day from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. or just email me directly and I'll hopefully be able to answer any questions that you guys might have. But other than that, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are staying inside where it's nice and safe. And I especially hope you guys aren't getting too bored out there. Until next time, we'll see you guys later. Peace out, Girl Scouts.